Well, hey, local church, we're so excited to share some news with you today.
Today is going to be a bit of a different Sunday. This week, an email went out to our church asking you to make every effort to be here today. And that email was not a slick marketing ploy just to get a larger attendance. We sent it because God is up to something really big in our lives and in our church. So today, rather than holding a normal sermon, we're going to communicate over a video what God has been doing. In just a moment, I'm going to share with you some very significant news, and then we'll take you on a little journey to understand the powerful work of God that has brought this all to bear. Then when we're finished, we'll go into an extended time of worship together to celebrate what God is doing. These last few months, I have been on a wild journey. And I'm going to say something that might sound a little bit dramatic, but it's true. I have never, ever in my life experienced a move of God like I have these last 3 months. The last time that I can remember God speaking as clearly as He has this past summer was back in 2014 when the Lord was showing Jana and me that we were supposed to leave Indianapolis, move here to Marietta, and plant this church. God is up to something big. So without further ado, I need to bring you in the loop on what He's been speaking to me in these last 3 months. My time as the lead pastor of this church is coming to an end. I want to let that settle in for just a second. Jana and I have had the overwhelming privilege of being your pastors for the last 9 years. But God is up to something new in our lives and in the life of this church. And we want you to know from the very beginning that nothing is wrong behind the scenes. We mean that. We're being completely transparent with you. There's no secret sin in my life that's forcing me to step down. Our marriage is healthy and strong. There's no brokenness behind the scenes with our staff team. And there's no one in our governance structure who's pushing us out the door. We're not disgruntled in any way with this church. In fact, from a purely human perspective, there is no reason to be stepping away from leadership of our church at this time. Our attendance is up 20% year over year right now. We are seeing waves of people come to Christ. We are having record-setting baptisms going on. There are so many good things taking place in the life of this church that it doesn't, from a human perspective, make sense to leave. But we're doing this because God has put a call on our lives. So you're probably asking, okay, Pastor, if everything is going so well, then why in the world would you be leaving? That's a great question. Before I answer it though, let's share a little bit about how leadership transitions work in the Bible.
Local church, I realize that for some of you, what you just heard from Pastor Ryan may have been shocking. And if that's you, I want to encourage you right now to not panic. Instead, we're about to do something that churches have done for centuries. Going through a leadership transition is a normal part of an organization's life, and you need to know that everything's going to be okay. Now, did you know that the Bible is full of leadership transitions? It turns out that God's been doing this for a long time, and He's an expert in handling things from one leader to the next. Now, let me just give you just a few examples. In the book of Numbers, chapter 27, Moses is kind of towards the end of his life. He's led the Israelites for 40 years, and now it's time for his successor, a guy named Joshua, to take over. And here's how the story goes. It says that Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and had him stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole assembly. Then he laid his hands on him and commissioned him, as the Lord instructed through Moses. Now we see another transition in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 2. Now King David, the famous king, he's handing off his kingship to his son, Solomon. And David had raised an enormous amount of money and supplies to build the temple in Jerusalem. And then he gave it all to Solomon so that he could complete the work. And then just one book later, in 2 Kings chapter 2, we have the dramatic story of the handoff of a prophetic ministry from Elijah to his successor, Elisha. And after 30 years of being God's primary prophet, Elijah gets swept up in a whirlwind and Elisha takes his place. But the leadership transitions don't stop there. In the New Testament, we see that God orchestrates all of these kinds of events as well. Now, the most obvious example happens in Acts chapter 1, when Jesus ascends into heaven. He hands the leadership of the church over to Peter and the disciples. Now, local church, I need you to hear me on this. I know that leadership transitions, man, they might feel scary at first. They can produce all kinds of anxiety inside of us. But if you look at the biblical pattern, when God is the one initiating those transitions, His blessings are all over those transitions. Because guess what? Joshua led the Israelites into the promised land. Solomon completed the work on the temple. Elisha had a double portion of Elijah's spirit. And Peter led the first century church to a massive explosion of growth. You see, when God initiates a transition, He knows what He's doing, and we can trust Him to do it.
Okay, so it's time for me to tell you the story and to fill you in on a number of details. First, you should know what I'm transitioning to. In a few months, I'm going to be stepping into a full-time leadership position of a national church planting organization called the 99 Network. The Lord has made it crystal clear that the place where I'm most needed in the kingdom of God is to be raising money so that other people can be planting churches around the United States. This new position does not require us to move out of Marietta, so Jana and I are not going far. I will remain a member of the teaching team here at the church, and my family will still be attending. Our kids will still be a part of the Elevate Youth. But I have to follow God's calling because He's clearly directed us to do this. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take you on a little journey and tell you the story of how we arrived at this decision.
In 2016, our family moved here to Marietta to plant this church. I grew up in this town and had left here in 2001, but God drew our family back here to this place where I grew up.
When we arrived here, we were so passionate about reaching people who were far from God. We wanted to build a church where people who didn't normally attend church could call their home. So we arrived here in town in May of that year, and unfortunately, we didn't have enough money to get a new church started. We had spent 2 years raising money, but we were still way short of reaching our launch budget. We needed God to provide a financial miracle, or else this new church that we were dreaming of would never come to pass.
Well, in the summer of 2016, God provided 2 financial miracles.
The first financial miracle came when a church in Muncie, Indiana called Union Chapel decided to help us. Union Chapel was pastored at the time by a leader named Greg Paris. And Greg was passionate about helping new churches around the country to get started. He's also the most generous leader I've ever met. And that summer, Greg decided to do something extraordinarily generous. He gave our church plant a $30,000 gift that could get us off the ground. Okay, I mean, who does that?
Then came the second financial miracle from God.
The second miracle came when a national church planting network decided to work with us. There's this organization called ARC who helps us start new churches all over the country. And after Pastor Greg gave us that $30,000 gift from his church, ARC came along and gave us an additional $50,000. So we watched God throw open the doors of financial blessing. And here's the truth. This church that we all love never would have gotten started without 2 other organizations providing us with the funds to do it.
So on October 23rd, 2016, we started this church. It was originally called Pathway Community Church, and it opened in the Reno Business Park.
Now there's a reason why these 2 stories are relevant. You and I are the recipients of the generosity of other people. Without those financial gifts in 2016, there would be no local church today. You wouldn't be sitting in the chair you're in right now. Your kids wouldn't be loved on and pastored in our kids' ministry this morning. Your students wouldn't be able to attend the Elevate Youth Ministry tonight. God has asked me to be that generous leader toward others. I'm going to be traveling around the country and raising up donors so that the 99 Network can provide to other church planters what was given to us back in 2016, the gift of financial resources to launch a new church.
Now, before we go any further, we probably need to tell you how Ryan and I started leading the 99 Network. Well, it all began at a retreat in Southern Indiana in 2023.
Our church was 7 years old at that point, and we were now giving back to church planting. We were sending out thousands of dollars a year to help other churches get started around the country because we wanted to be a blessing to others just like Union Chapel had done with us. So Jesse and I were both helping Union Chapel to coach church planters. I'd gotten to know Jesse over the phone, and very quickly he and I built a great friendship. We joke it was a bromance together. But in 2023, we were invited to a retreat where we would help Union Chapel to strategize about sending other churches out around the country. And boy, oh boy, did God have a surprise up his sleeve for us. We had no idea that both of our worlds would change after that retreat.
Now, the first thing that surprised us is that we found out that we would be forming a new organization called the 99 Network. Pastor Greg Paris shared that he would be retiring soon, and he didn't want the church planting efforts that he'd started to end with his retirement. And so we used this retreat to plan out the launch of the 99 Network.
But it was what happened at the end of the retreat that really surprised us the most.
Yeah, Pastor Greg pointed to Ryan and said, "I'd like you to serve as the founding president of the organization." And then he pointed to me and said, "I'd like for you to move your family from Phoenix, Arizona to Marietta, Ohio. Ryan's going to need your help in both the church and the network." And then Greg put this ridiculous offer on the table. He offered to pay for my family to move across the country and even offered to help pay my salary for the first year so that we could make this transition happen. It was definitely not what we were expecting to have happen at that retreat. And so when I went home, I made sure to talk to Carla about it.
When Jesse came home and shared the whole story with me, the strangest things started to happen. I should have been very resistant to picking up our family and moving out here, but God just gave me a peace about it. One domino after another started to go down, and we knew that we were supposed to be here. So in August 2023, we sold our home, packed up our family, and moved across the country. Needless to say, I had no idea what God's bigger plan was, but wow, He was up to something much bigger than I thought.
So the Vacas arrived here, and Jesse and I went to work on leading both this church and the 99 Network together. I thought that we would stay in that arrangement for a long, long time. I had no sense that God would begin moving everyone around this summer. But wow, all of a sudden in June, God began a dramatic work in my life. Guys, I have to tell you, it has been a wild summer of God doing some really strange things. The best way that I can describe to you what happened is this. It's like the Holy Spirit blew through my life like a tornado and made it crystal clear that my time as the pastor of this church was up. God gave me several confirmations that He was indeed moving me out and bringing in a new lead pastor. Everything started when out of the blue, God sent me two different people who independently prophesied over my life. Both of them told me the same thing. They both said that I needed to leave my position as the lead pastor of the church and focus my full-time attention on the 99 Network. And the other thing they both did was they told me that I should hand off the church to Jesse to be my successor here. Now, I don't just let anyone prophesy over me and then call it God's will for my life, but this was too strange to just ignore it. So in mid-June, I began really praying and seeking the Lord's will. I started coming into the church late at night and asking God if He was trying to shift both Jesse and me into different roles. I spent many, many hours in the worship center crying out to God, asking Him to make His will clear to me. And that's when His dramatic confirmations began to come in. The first dramatic confirmation came in the Columbus airport, which I know sounds a little bit strange. I was on a trip to Phoenix and I laid out a crystal clear fleece before the Lord. So I don't know if you know what a fleece is, but there's a powerful story in the book of Judges chapter 6 where Gideon needs to make a major decision. So he lays out a fleece, an animal skin, and basically says, God, if you want me to go to war, then let there be dew on the ground, but not dew on the fleece tomorrow morning. And of course, that's exactly what happens in the story. Gideon didn't have enough confirmation yet, so he came back to God a second time in prayer and said, God, if you really want me to go to war, then this time let there only be dew on my fleece, but not on the ground. And of course, that's what happens in the story. So I laid out my version of a fleece. At the end of June, I had to take this trip to Phoenix and help some church planters who were launching out there in the next few months. So I told God that if He really wanted me to leave my position as the lead pastor, then He had to speak to me in terms that were so clear that I couldn't deny it. So my fleece was Zerubbabel. You're probably asking yourself who the heck that is. Well, in the book of Ezra, Zerubbabel is the guy who rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem. When the Jews were returning to captivity from Babylon, God gave him this assignment to rebuild it. So I told God, Lord, I will not leave my position as a pastor unless you put Zerubbabel in my path in some way while I'm on this trip to Phoenix. And guess what God did? He answered that fleece. I was sitting in the Columbus airport and I decided to listen to a sermon, and I randomly scrolled through and chose one church out of who knows how many were available that I could have listened to. I'd never heard of this church before, and they had probably 200 sermons that were posted, and I just kind of randomly scrolled through and just hit one out of nowhere, not knowing anything from the title of what the sermon was about. And the sermon started with these words, "Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord Almighty." Those words were a prophecy that Zechariah gave Zerubbabel when he was encouraging him to continue the building on the temple. And the entire sermon that I listened to that night in the airport was about Zechariah's words to Zerubbabel. So there I sat, completely shaken, emotional in the Columbus airport, because God had answered my fleece. And I knew that I had to come home and open up my hands and release this church to the next leader. But then came the second confirmation story. And once again, it involved an airport. Only this time it was the St. Louis airport. Jana and I were on an anniversary trip this summer to Lake Tahoe. When we were flying home, one of our flights went from Las Vegas to St. Louis. And while I was on that flight, I was doing lots of thinking and pondering about the 99 Network. By this time, I felt quite confident that God was telling me that I needed to make this transition, but I still felt like I needed more confirmation for me to really know that God was in this. I was a little dense and struggling to understand God's will. On that flight, I was thinking through who I needed to recruit to come with me into the network. And names and faces were running through my mind of people I've known over the years, but there was one person who I couldn't get off my mind. I have a friend here who lives in Marietta. I'm just going to call her Hope. It's not her real name. Because I don't want to give away her identity, because I want to give her the opportunity to tell her own part of this story in her timing. A number of years ago, I had invited Hope to consider working with our church because she's a very talented woman. It didn't work out at that time, and I kind of lost touch with her. Well, guess who had texted me while I was in the air? You guessed it. It was Hope. And her text said, "Please call me tonight. I have something I really need to talk with you about." So I got off the plane and I called her in the St. Louis airport. And what she said next shook me. She was in tears on the phone and she said, "Ryan, I'm at a conference in Chicago and God has wrecked me here." She said, "God is telling me that I'm supposed to leave my business behind that I'm working in and give my attention to ministry." And then she went on to say this. She said, "For the last 2 days, God has been telling me to pick up the phone and call you." By this point, I was now 100% convinced that God was moving me. So the question became, okay, well, who is the next lead pastor supposed to be? Now remember that earlier in the summer, 2 people had spoken over me and they both said the same thing, that I was supposed to raise up Jesse Vaca as the next lead pastor. So I took that to the Lord in prayer. I spent hours and hours in prayer asking the Lord if it was His will for Jesse to be my successor. I had 2 experiences here in the church where I was praying by myself and I heard God tell me that Jesse was the guy. I felt like the Lord was saying, I brought him here in 2023 for this purpose. Now, before I go any further, I want you to know what I've seen from Jesse these last 2 years. He is an exceptional leader. I've seen him take over the leadership of our staff team, and he's done an amazing job of helping them to deepen and grow their ministries. Jesse brought a whole new apprenticeship program into our church, and now we finally have a leadership development pipeline in place. I've gotten to know him very well these last 2 years, and he has demonstrated to me a love for God and a life of integrity. So our bylaws spell out how a lead pastor transition is supposed to happen. In a transition like this, I am supposed to nominate a new lead pastor to our governance members, and then a confirmation team is formed. The confirmation team then ultimately makes the decision on whether or not my nominee is accepted as the new lead pastor. So earlier this month, because of what God had spoken both through prophetic words and through my prayers, and because of the high quality leadership that Jesse had displayed to me these last 2 years, I went to our governance and I formally nominated him to be the next lead pastor of our church. Local church, I'm thrilled to share with you that the confirmation committee voted unanimously to make Jesse Vaca the next lead pastor, which means in a few months, Jesse will be shifting out of his seat as the executive pastor and into this new role as the lead pastor.
Guys, this has been a crazy experience for our family. When we came here in 2023, we had no idea that this would be where God would lead us next. But we're honored to be here. We love you and what God is doing here and are so excited to be on this journey with you as we continue to pastor here at Local Church.
At Local Church, I am so excited, honored, and humbled to have been selected for this new role. I want you to know how thrilled we are that God brought us here and that He's given us this incredible opportunity to lead our church. And listen, I know you have a lot of questions, and so I want to spend a few moments answering them. Now, first, let's talk about the timeline. Now, even though our governance teams have voted to approve me as the next lead pastor, there will be a period of transition as I move into my new role. Now, Ryan and I are working with our trustees to get an official handoff date in place, so stay tuned for that. In the next few weeks, we hope to share with you a greater level of detail about the exact date of this leadership handoff. Now, second, I want you to know that the mission and vision of this church are not going to change. We have 4 core values that guide us, and those values will remain intact under my leadership. Our first core value is that we give until it hurts. We're a church who gives away 10% of our resources to expand the kingdom of God here locally and all around the world. As you know, we give money to global missions. We're helping to plant a church in Houston right now, and we give money to support local families in need. All of that will continue on, and we will still be a church who gives until it hurts. Now, our second core value is that we do life together, and that's not changing either. We will remain the loving and relationally driven church that we've always been, and fully believe that the best way that we can care for everyone is through our groups and our teams here in our church. Now, our third core value is that we are multipliers. We live out the spirit of multiplication in two important ways. We multiply leaders within the church, and our goal is to multiply churches. Again, none of that is changing. We'll continue to run our leadership development plan so that you can continue to grow as a leader and as a follower of Jesus. And we're going to continue working toward launching life-giving churches all around us. And finally, our fourth core value is that we love those who don't love God. Now, this is the heartbeat of our church. We've always been a church who cares deeply about people coming to faith in Jesus. In fact, it's the reason we've seen so many baptisms this year. None of that is changing. Under my leadership as our new lead pastor, these core values will continue to be a guiding light for us. I'm sure you're also wondering what's going to happen with our Colgate campus. Well, I want to assure you that I am 100% behind getting us into that facility. Now, we've all given generously hundreds of thousands of dollars towards this project, and we'll continue working hard to make this dream a reality. Now, we're going to continue the capital campaign and keep moving forward with our building plans. I'll give my absolute best effort towards getting our church into that facility. With God's help, we'll open our church services there in the future.
I need to share one more change that's happening. In order for me to make this move over to the 99 Network, I'm going to need lots of administrative support. I can't raise the money from donors toward church planting and coach several dozen churches without an incredible administrator by my side to help me to do this. So as I tried to sort through who that administrator should be, God kept laying our kids pastor, Dee Capel, on my heart. Now, I've had the privilege of working with Dee for the last 8 years, and she is the strongest administrator I've ever been around. God has uniquely wired her to carry layers and layers of detail without letting a thing fall through the cracks. So I asked Jesse for his permission to invite Dee to come with me into the 99 Network. And as I already told you, Jesse is a man of high character and he wants to see both organizations succeed. So he graciously gave me his blessing to make the invitation to Dee. Dee spent the last several weeks on her sabbatical thinking through my invitation, and she decided to join me in the church planting efforts through the 99 Network. She and I are going to put our skills together to launch many, many churches around the country.
Well, like you, we're incredibly thankful for Dee's 8 years of service on our church staff. It's been an honor working with her. Now, practically speaking, here's what that means. Dee will be returning to work with us tomorrow because her sabbatical is now finished. She's going to stay on our staff and help us carry our kids ministry through the transition, while the hiring process runs in search of her replacement. Now, in the next few weeks, you'll see a job posting and a job description for this particular role. Now, from the bottom of my heart, I'm so grateful for Dee Capel and her years of faithful service.
Hey guys, we just want you to know that Shelly and I are in full support of this transition happening. Honestly, we were a little bit taken back when we first heard the news, but we got the chance to sit in it. And when we heard what God was doing through Ryan and the 99 Network and how God moved all the pieces into the right place, we couldn't argue with that. And so we've worked with Jesse for the past 2 years. It's been an amazing ride, and I'm super excited for what's to come.
Yes, I want to echo that. We're 100% behind this move and in full support of what God is doing here. Our youth ministry is thriving right now, and I don't see that changing in any way with this shift. We're going to continue pouring into the kids with the love of Jesus. We're grateful to be a part of this staff team, and we appreciate Dee and the work that she's done over the years. We're excited for how God is stirring her up and how He's going to use her to serve churches across the country through the 99 Network.
Okay guys, this has obviously been a lot to absorb this morning, but I want to tell you something. I have no doubt that our church's best days are in front of us, not behind us. I really mean that. God is 100% in this move. Every part of this is coming from Him. So we have to trust His plan for our church and move forward together. In a few months, Jesse Vaca will not just be your pastor, he will be my pastor as well. And I'm excited about the move. Local church, the best is yet to come.
I couldn't agree more. The best is yet to come.